All right, everybody, this is Weston with Carry Concealment, and it is time to update some videos. And today we're going to go over the X1 Raptor and some adjustments you can make to your holster when you receive it. Let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to notice when you get your X1 Raptor out of the box is that there is nothing on the back side of the holster. Now, inside of the holster, you will have a bag with a little bit of hardware in it. We'll go over the contents of that here in just a moment. But what you should see is two washers here that would normally control the retention on a typical holster. We'll get into more of what these do here in a moment, as well as another washer here on the bottom end and one on the opposite side over here. These two screws are going to be what controls the Tegris now curve bridge for your X1 and ultimately control where the magnet rests inside of this holster. We're going to switch over to a first-person view and talk more about adjustments to this setup. Okay, so here is the hardware bag that you receive with your X1. I'm going to open it up real quick. And in case you're wondering, yes, this is a Hummer. Why are we using a Hummer as a background? Well, I need the federal government to know that this was a purchase for the business, of course. So we've got 3 posts here. Posts are essentially the nuts in this situation, and then we've got 3 screws. Now, every hanger is slightly different, but for your X1, if you have a dual layer holster, we will send slightly longer posts. If it's a single layer, they'll be slightly shorter. But these posts are going to go into their respective hole patterns. And most hangers for the competition guys on the market are going to use these 3 top locations. Now, this top slot on either end allows this holster to be used with both Blade Tech and Safariland spacing. Safariland using the inner part of this oval rather than the outer part like the Blade Tech does. But 95% of our holsters have this exact same combination. There's a couple of outlying holsters that we still hand drill, but most of these are done by the CNC. So if you chose Safariland, you'll use these top 2 holes along with the bottom one. If you chose Blade Tech, you'll use these top 2 as well as this one here or here. And then there's a bunch of other holster hangers that you may or may not be able to make fit with this. A lot of companies have their own proprietary stuff, so you're forced to use their holsters with their hangers, so keep that in mind. Now, to go into the next part of your holster, this one in particular is our generic 2011. This is a demo unit, and I want to talk briefly about retention. So the retention on the X1 is always going to be off of the magnet, which is just inside the muzzle here of the holster, and it is adjustable in its positioning, and it is also adjustable in its retention to a certain degree. So let's get into the details on how you can change your holster for your handgun. Okay, one thing to note about the X1 and its magnet is that the magnet itself comes with a sticker pre-applied. Now, this is a piece of Cordura with 3M backing, a high heat resistant version of the 3M material. Cordura is naturally heat resistant as well. And this little spacer on the magnet does 2 things. For one, it creates a little bit of a cushion between the muzzle end of your firearm and the magnet. It also, in the event that the magnet shatters, which is very rare, but I'll go over that in a moment, it keeps the magnet all together instead of letting the magnet shatter into several pieces. Now, it is possible with super high round count and very, very high muzzle temperatures that this magnet can deteriorate over time. So if you have an issue with this, simply send us an email. We'll send you some fresh magnets. It's not a big deal. There is also the X1 hardware pack. For those of you who like to have spares all the time, you can purchase those. They're $5. You'll get several washers, an additional magnet, and the screws and things you need to go along with your X1. So let's go over how to adjust this. Now, the first thing I want to make mention of, removing the sticker from your magnet will increase the magnetism because we are closing the gap from your muzzle to the magnet. So it is about a 7.5 pound magnet. If you remove this little washer, you'll be getting all 7.5 pounds of that force. With the washer on there, it reduces the magnetism by about 15% is my estimation. So if you're looking for more retention, that is a step you can take. Additionally, I want to talk about where the muzzle of the firearm and the magnet are related. So obviously, magnet is round, muzzle on most firearms, round, or at least the barrel is, which is what we're making contact with. If you offset the magnet from the muzzle of the firearm by drawing it down on the bridge, you will have less surface area contact between the magnet and the firearm, therefore reducing the retention. If the circular shape of the magnet and the circular shape of the barrel are perfectly lined up, you will increase the amount of material that is making contact with the magnet, therefore getting the maximum amount of retention from your magnet. So I hope that makes sense, but essentially the more metal the magnet touches, the more retention you're going to get. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the actual positioning of the magnet. Now, when you order a holster from us, if you specify, hey, I've got a Kimber 2K 5-inch, we're going to preset that magnet at 5 inches for you. If for whatever reason it is incorrectly set up from us, or you need to make an adjustment, or perhaps you have another firearm that is just slightly different length in muzzle length, what you can do is loosen. I do not recommend removing these screws because they're a little tricky to install, especially because the magnet tries to eat them when they come loose. But you can loosen this bridge, and now you can see that it is moving in and out of this holster. Place your firearm inside the holster, make sure it's bottomed out on the trigger guard, and then you can press on this bridge. You can see here, if I had a shorter firearm, it would draw into the holster. But press onto this bridge. I usually use my chest, and I'll kind of push a little bit of pressure towards myself so I know that that magnet is making contact. And then I am going to tighten these screws back up in that location. So now this magnet is properly set and it's retaining the firearm perfectly. So there's one other change that we can make, and it involves these two screws. So on a normal holster, these two screws would control how much retention is on the trigger guard of the firearm. Well, in the case of the X1, we don't want trigger guard retention because we want as little friction as possible on your firearm during the draw. So we omit the retention area on both the front and back side of the trigger guard, which is why the draws on the X1s are so stinking clean, because you really only need to defeat the magnet. Now, because of that, we still have these two screws, and they do still make a change, but they're not going to affect the retention directly. What they do change is the overall compression of the holster, and I'm going to show you how that can make a difference. So in this case, being a universal 2011 holster, our Kimber 2K in here has a little bit of play. Keep in mind that the universal 2011 is going to be designed off the largest 2011 that I have found, which currently is the MPA Lock V2. And this 2K is a little bit smaller, so it's got some play. So what I'm going to do to take up some of that play is I'm going to take my screwdriver and I'm going to evenly adjust these two screws down, which is closing down the holster. The 2K still fits in there nice and smooth. The magnet's still doing its thing. And I've pretty significantly reduced the amount of play that is the firearm has in the holster. Now again, with anything generic or universal, there are going to be some give and take. You now have a holster that fits several 2011s, but it's not going to fit any of them perfectly like a holster that is designed specifically for that model. In the case of this 2K, the universal is almost a perfect fit, and the MPA and some of the other firearms fit really well in here. Certain 2011s like the Atlas that are actually on the smaller side have a little bit of play even with these retention screws screwed down and tightened up, because it is significantly smaller than the MPA. So just something to keep in mind. The last thing I want to make mention of with your X1 Raptor is that we do not send it with any Loctite installed at all. That is because there is a strong likelihood that you're going to want to play around with some things. You're going to need to mount the hanger yourself. You may need to move the magnet bridge in and out to match the barrel length of your firearm if we messed it up from the shop, or if you actually bought it for a different firearm that we didn't list on the website. And you're almost certainly going to want to play around with these two screws because not all firearms are exactly the same size. And the model we test fit before it leaves the shop may not be exactly like yours. So because of that, these are not Loctited. It is your responsibility to retain your hardware. It does happen, unfortunately, that some of these things will come loose. People will lose parts. And in that case, Carry Concealment is always going to take care of you. You just need to email us. But to avoid that headache, when you get a setup that you are happy with, we do recommend using a very small amount of blue Loctite. You can even use fingernail polish just to gum the threads a little bit, and that could save you a headache at the range. And ultimately, once you find a sweet spot setup with your X1 Raptor, there's really not much reason to mess with them going forward. This is designed to be a good, reliable, heavy-duty, hard-use race holster, and we don't think there's a whole lot of tinkering that needs to be done after the setup procedure. So if you have questions about the X1, you can drop them in the comments below. Even better, send us an email at sales@carryconcealment.com. This business is built by competitors, so thank you so much for years of support. We look forward to doing more of these videos so you guys can adjust and adapt your gear to your needs. Take care.